The reason you grew up under Jim Crow laws is because there were white people who were racist. If you think it's all of a sudden disappeared in 50 years, then I think that you don't actually have a real grasp on how tenacious some of these beliefs and prejudices are.
Welcome back, everybody. And if you are new here, you picked a great video to start with. So what we have here is a roundtable debate where a group of people with very different backgrounds and very different life experiences sat down to talk about racism, reparations, and whether systemic inequality is still real in America today. And let me tell you, it did not stay polite for long. There is one man at this table who is absolutely convinced that racism is a thing of the past, and the women sitting across from him were not about to let that slide without a fight. Stay all the way to the end, because the moment near the finish line, I promise you, is the kind of thing that stops a conversation cold. You do not want to miss how this plays out. Also, I always love knowing where my audience is watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. It genuinely means a lot to see where you all are tuning in from around the world. All right, let's get into it.
You would not believe me.
I would not. I just read an article in the LA Times last week about racism, and the white people that were polled said that there wasn't really a racism problem, and the black people who were polled said that there was a racism problem. Now, who's speaking the truth there?
The white folks.
Not necessarily. I'm a white folk, and I don't believe that racism isn't a problem.
There's no such thing as racism.
Well, that doesn't, just because it's a cultural construct doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't exist.
No, really.
Do you believe racism?
You're a black man, and you're going to sit here and tell me that racism doesn't exist.
And I grew up on a plantation. Racism does not exist. It's a lie. Do you disagree with that?
Oh, please. I pastor an African-American church. I see it daily.
But you're a white woman. You pastor in a black church.
Yeah.
Where's your proof that racism exists?
The proof is in the differences in their salaries.
In their salaries? That's not true. I mean, people work at different levels and at different times and different jobs, so that's not proof.
I have women in my congregation who are caregivers.
Right.
And they are paid to the person less than the women of other races, other colors that work for the same agency.
Okay, so I pay my black employees more than I do my white ones.
Good for you.
More, is that racism?
I'm not sure what that is.
Why not?
Racism is a power differential.
I'm discriminating against my white employees. I'm paying my black people, and my white employees are better workers.
No, it is discrimination.
Is that
There's no doubt about
racism?
it, but I'm not sure it's racism.
Why not?
Because the white folks still call the shots.
But I'm calling the shot.
Well,
The
and
shots.
if you want
I'm
to
calling the
discriminate
shot.
in that manner, I don't know that anybody would ever stop you.
Is it racism?
No.
Why, if the white man does it, I don't do that, by the way. So why is it if the white man did it, it's racism? If I do it, it's not.
Because.
Do you believe white people are superior?
No.
Do you believe in white supremacy?
No. I don't believe in white supremacy and the fact that they're supreme, but the white man does have the power to lock black men up, black women up. He does have the power to put drugs in our community, not in their community. He does have the power to hire and fire. So he does have that power.
This is where the debate gets real, because the moment the black woman brought up that LA Times article, she didn't just make a point, she brought receipts. And here is what makes that so powerful. She didn't say, I feel like racism exists. She said, here is a poll, here is data, here is what people on both sides actually reported from their own lived experience. That is not emotion, that is evidence. And what does the opponent do with that evidence? He says the white folks are speaking the truth. Just like that. No analysis, no breakdown. Just, the white people are right. You have to understand how revealing that is. Because when someone dismisses the experiences of an entire group of people that quickly, it tells you the conversation was never really open to begin with. Now here is the part that blew my mind. The white woman pastor stepped in and said she pastors an African-American church and sees racism daily, and the opponent's immediate response was, but you're a white woman, as if her proximity to the black community somehow disqualifies her from witnessing what happens inside it. That logic doesn't hold up at all. But she didn't flinch. She said, the proof is in the salaries. And then she went further. She gave a specific, real, Documented example from her own congregation, women doing the same job at the same agency, getting paid less because of their race. That is not a feeling. That is not a theory. That is a paycheck. You cannot argue with a paycheck. And here is something worth understanding historically. Wage discrimination against black workers in America didn't start recently. It goes back generations, through sharecropping systems after the Civil War where black families worked land and never saw fair compensation. The economic gap people talk about today has roots, and when the pastor pointed to those salary differences, she was pointing at something that has been documented for over a century. The opponent kept saying that's not proof, but he never once provided a counter-explanation for why those women in the same job were being paid less. He just dismissed it, and that dismissal, that is the most telling part of this entire exchange so far.
What does that feel like to hear yourself blaming and complaining about another man and that you can't make it because some other man to keep you down? I don't know what that feels like. I've never had that in my life. What does that feel like to believe that a white man can keep you down, so you got to complain about it rather than overcoming it? What does that feel like?
Well, me being an alpha male myself, I don't know what that feels like.
Are you complaining for other beta males?
No, I've never said that, though.
Getting back to your question of why white people are blamed, slavery.
Slavery?
Was a white person, a white created problem, I guess.
Why had nothing to do with slavery?
Oh, well, most of the slave owners were white.
In places like Tennessee, I believe, or one of there, a lot of black people owned slaves in those days.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't happen.
And it was the Arabs who went over to Africa, Mommy Africa, and bought the slave from other black people and took them around the world. It wasn't the white people, and anyone that could afford a slave bought one.
I mean...
So what do you think about the attack on white men?
Well,
Is it right?
I understand it, you know.
You understand it?
So I understand why African Americans were angry at white people. Because
it's impossible you could be wrong, but that the problem's with you and it has nothing to do with white people?
I don't think that that's true, no.
It's amazing. It's really amazing to me that black people feel that white people are superior. It explains a lot, too. When I hear and see them protesting and talking about white supremacy, because if they didn't believe it, they wouldn't be saying it. So they do believe white people are superior. And that's why they beg for reparations, affirmative action. And
I think you're conflating white supremacy, which is something that you've kind of applied to this conversation, and not necessarily anything that, I don't know that anyone, I mean, I'm sure some people believe it, but I don't know if that's necessarily the truth that I would
You
speak
say
to.
in your book, white supremacy frame your self-image.
Yes.
And what do you mean by that?
I mean that, you know, if you look in our culture, particularly as a woman, white women are, you know, championed more. They're seen as the beauty standard.
This part right here is where the opponent thought he was winning, and he was not even close. He tried to flip the entire conversation by asking what it feels like to blame another man for your problems. He framed it like acknowledging systemic inequality is the same as making excuses, and I need you to really sit with that for a second, because there is a massive difference between saying a system has disadvantaged you and saying you are helpless because of it. Those are not the same thing, and mixing them up, intentionally or not, is one of the oldest debate tricks in the book. Then, the black woman came back and said something straightforward. Most of the slave owners were white, simple, factual, and the opponent's response was basically, well, black people sold other black people into slavery too. Now look, that part of history is real. African tribal leaders did participate in the slave trade. That is documented. But, and this matters, using that fact to dismiss the specific legacy of race-based chattel slavery in America is intellectually dishonest, because the system that was built here, the laws that enforced it, the economy that profited from it, that was not an African tribal structure. That was a legal institution on this soil. Now this is the part that really got me. The opponent said, and I need you to hear this clearly, it's amazing to me that black people feel white people are superior. He said that as if believing white supremacy exists is the same as believing white people are superior. Those are completely opposite things. One is a critique of a system, the other is personal belief. He conflated them completely. And the black woman called it out immediately. She said he was conflating white supremacy with something nobody in that room actually said. Then the young black woman brought up something that often gets dismissed in these conversations. She talked about beauty standards, about growing up and not seeing herself represented, about white women being championed as the standard. And here is why that point matters beyond personal feelings. When one group's appearance, culture, and identity is consistently centered as the default in media, advertising, education, and entertainment that shapes how everyone sees themselves, that is not opinion. That is documented in psychology research going back decades.
You know, I am in a lot of ways the opposite of what is seen as beautiful in this country. And as a young woman, you know, discovering myself, developing my self-esteem, you know, looking for representation, I didn't often find it because of white supremacy. Because,
Wow.
Yeah.
Do the white women make you feel that way?
Absolutely not.
They don't make you feel that way on your own?
I mean, I don't feel that way anymore because I've become very comfortable with myself as a grown woman. I'm speaking more about how I felt as a 12-year-old girl.
But when you felt that way, did the white women make you feel that way?
No.
And so
It's
why do
also,
you
it's
blame
not about
them then?
individual people. It's about a system and the way that our culture is presented. It's not necessarily about any individual person or even, you know, small group of people. It is a systemic global issue.
And so your self-image then was the white woman better and prettier and better than me?
That's what the world thinks. I don't know that
But
I
did you think
actually
that?
believe that.
So how did it frame your image if you didn't think that?
No, but I'm saying you think all lives matter.
Yes.
And a black life is included in all those lives. So you think black lives matter.
I don't need to say Black Lives Matter. When I say all, I mean all.
So you're including black people.
But I know that black lives doesn't matter to black people.
So you're including black people when you say all lives matter?
Yes.
So that means when I say black
Listen
lives
to-
matter, you agree because you think all lives matter.
I grew up in Alabama under the Jim Crow laws. We couldn't live in certain places like that.
Right.
But we had family. We were better off then than blacks are today when they can do and live wherever they want. Why weren't we worse off then under the Jim Crow laws than the blacks are
Because,
today?
first of all, the reason you grew up under Jim Crow laws is because there were white people who were racist. If you think it's all of a sudden disappeared in 50 years, then I think that you don't actually have a real grasp on how tenacious some of these beliefs and prejudices are.
Oh, this ending right here. Because the moment the pastor said, the reason you grew up under Jim Crow laws is because there were white people who were racists, the entire debate shifted. That was not an attack. That was a mirror. She took his own story and held it up in front of him. This man sat there and said racism doesn't exist, but he also said he grew up under Jim Crow. You cannot hold both of those positions at the same time. Jim Crow laws were not a weather event. They were not an accident of nature. They were written. They were enforced. They were designed specifically to restrict black Americans from voting, from education, from economic opportunity, from basic dignity. That is racism in legislation form. So when he says racism doesn't exist, what exactly does he think Jim Crow was? And then the pastor said something that I think is genuinely one of the sharpest points in this entire conversation. She said, "If you think it all disappeared in 50 years, you don't have a real grasp on how tenacious these beliefs are." And she is right. You have to understand. Deeply held cultural beliefs do not vanish because a law changes. Attitudes that were normalized across generations do not disappear in half a century. Historians and sociologists have written extensively about how prejudice transmits through families, institutions, and social structures even when the legal framework around it is dismantled. And before all of that, the young black woman made a point that I think deserves more credit than it got in that room. She said it is not about individual people, it is about a system, and that distinction is everything. Because most people who benefit from an unequal system are not sitting around thinking about it, they are just living inside it. That does not make them evil, but it also does not mean the system isn't real. This segment showed you 3 women, different ages, different races, different backgrounds, all arriving at the same conclusion through completely different life experiences. That is not brainwashing. That is convergence. And convergence like that is hard to dismiss. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.